General Arya Torin's heart thudded against her ribcage as the massive doors to the assembly hall swung open with a solemn creak. The air inside was thick with tension, charged with the murmurs of countless species gathered under one dome. As the first human to ever address the Galactic Empire on such a critical matter, every step she took across the polished marble floor echoed like a solitary drumbeat marking the gravity of her mission. The hall itself was an architectural marvel, a vast, circular chamber with seating arranged in ascending tiers, offering a clear view of the central podium. Bioluminescent fixtures cast a soft glow on representatives from over 100 planets, their varied forms, from the shimmering, gelatinous blobs of Gliese to the feathered serpentine figures of Seraphix, creating a mosaic of interstellar diversity. Arya approached the podium, her uniform crisply tailored to command respect, yet it was her poised demeanor that silenced the room. She scanned the assembly, her gaze pausing briefly on the imposing figure of Supreme Commander Vrax, whose 4 eyes returned her stare with undisguised skepticism. "Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings of the Galactic Council," Arya began, her voice resonant, "I stand before you not only as a representative of Earth but as an advocate for peace and reason." She paused, allowing her words to permeate the charged atmosphere. "Humanity is young in the eyes of the galaxy. We bring a perspective fresh and untarnished by the scars of ancient rivalries that today threaten to plunge us all into chaos." From his seat Vrax huffed, the sound distinctly audible. "General Torin speaks of freshness as if naivety were a virtue. In war, it is not." Arya turned to address him directly. "Supreme Commander Vrax, it is true we lack the centuries of conflict that some consider experience. However, it is precisely this so-called naivety that makes us invaluable. We see not just the battle lines, but the people behind them, the lives at stake." Whispers fluttered around the hall, a mix of approval and dissent. Arya continued, "We have come to respect and learn from your cultures and histories. In return, we ask for the same respect, to decide our path. Our choice is neutrality." Arya projected a hologram from her wrist device, displaying Earth in a luminescent blue, peaceful and unmarred by the fires of war. "This is Earth. For us, it is not just a planet but a promise of what can be achieved when diverse peoples unite under the banner of peace." A murmur rippled through the assembly as the image zoomed in, showing cities bustling with life and green landscapes thriving under the care of its inhabitants. "We are ready to share knowledge, aid in medicine, and advance technology for all. But we cannot do so if we are forced into war." Vrax stood, his stature towering over most in the room. "Admirable sentiments, General. But while you speak of potential, the rest of us deal in reality, the reality that the rebels threaten every civilization, including yours. Neutrality might as well be a myth in times like these." Arya met his gaze, unflinching. "And yet, it is our right to choose, is it not? Enshrined in the very charters that founded this assembly? We seek to be a bridge, not a battleground." A seasoned diplomat from the aquatic planet of Aquarius raised a webbed hand, catching the speaker's attention. "If Earth is dragged into conflict, what becomes of the aid she promises? What becomes of the neutrality that could one day stop this war? Yes, what of the lives saved by staying the hand of war rather than wielding its sword?" Arya added, her question hanging in the air like a challenge. The room fell into a contemplative silence. Arya knew she had reached them, not all, but some. Minds were pondering, the seeds of doubt or perhaps hope planted among the council. "As you deliberate, consider not just the immediate fires that war ignites but the enduring light of peace," Arya concluded, her tone imbued with a quiet strength. She stepped back, her part said, her plea made. The assembly buzzed with renewed conversation as she made her way back to her seat. Her advisor, a seasoned Earth diplomat named Marek, leaned in, whispering, "Well done, Arya. Let's hope it's enough." "It has to be," she replied, watching as the debates ignited across the tiers, each word exchanged a flicker in the looming shadow of war. As the chapter closes, Arya sits, her resolve clear but her mind racing with the multitude of possibilities. Her plea for neutrality had been made. Now, it was up to the assembly to decide humanity's fate. The weight of her world rested not just on the might of armies or the strength of shields, but on the power of words and the hope of peace. The next morning, as the first light of Xiphiron's twin suns pierced through the translucent ceiling of the assembly hall, the debates resumed with a fervor that mirrored the rising heat outside. General Arya Torin returned to the fray, her determination as unyielding as the night before. Today, she knew, her arguments must cut even deeper. Arya listened intently as representatives from various planets voiced their concerns. The room was a cacophony of languages, translated instantly by the devices worn by all attendees. Each argument added layers to the complex tapestry of galactic politics. Just as a representative from the mining planet of Kryton argued for compulsory military support from all capable species, Arya rose to speak. Her voice sliced through the noise, clear and commanding. While I recognize and respect the fear that drives us towards unity and defense, we must question the cost of such unity. Is it merely the presence of bodies on a battlefield, or should it not also be the preservation of those who can offer other, equally vital, resources? Before anyone could respond, Supreme Commander Vrax interjected, his tone scornful. General Torin speaks of cost, yet she fails to see the price of inaction. Without human involvement, our strategies lack a critical flank against the rebels. Arya's gaze was steely as she addressed him directly. Supreme Commander, with all due respect, the critical flank you mentioned could very well lead to the obliteration of emerging civilizations such as ours. We offer aid, not as soldiers, but as mediators and healers. Our involvement in war should not negate our autonomy. The buzz in the chamber grew louder, some nods of agreement emerging among the sea of dissent. It was then that a soft-spoken delegate from the peaceful agrarian system of Verdant spoke up. If I may, he began, his voice barely above a whisper yet somehow carrying across the room. General Torin's proposal for neutrality could indeed serve as a model. Verdant, too, has benefited from avoiding conflicts, focusing instead on supplying food and medical aid. Encouraged, Arya continued, imagine a galaxy where not every world is drafted into conflict but can choose their contribution based on their strengths and moral standings. This is the foundation upon which true unity can be built, not through coercion but through mutual respect and cooperation. A delegate from the technologically advanced planet of Signet chimed in, their mechanical voice modulating slightly with emotion. The general's words resonate with wisdom. Signet can offer enhanced defense systems and intelligence capabilities. Must we also send our people to die when our technology can save more lives? The assembly murmured in contemplation, the tide of opinion showing signs of shift. Vrax, however, was not swayed. Rising to his full height, he addressed the room with a booming voice. These are lofty ideals, but we face a merciless enemy. We need more than just food and technology. We need soldiers, and we need them now. Arya took a deep breath, her next words crucial. And you shall have soldiers from those who choose to fight. What we ask is not exemption from helping but from becoming another casualty of war without our consent. Let those who fight choose their fate, just as those who heal or innovate choose theirs. Her words hung heavy in the room. It was a moment before the youngest delegate, a recent addition from the newly allied planet of Nova, stood up. I support General Torin, he declared boldly. Nova was ravaged by civil war. Only through neutrality and the galaxy's conflicts have we begun to heal and rebuild. We must be allowed to continue on our path. The session wore on, debates raging like the storms of Xiphiron's outer moons. As alliances formed and opinions shifted, Arya felt the subtle yet significant movement of the galactic heartstrings. Today's discussions would end without a resolution, but the seeds of understanding had been sown. As the assembly adjourned for the day, Arya's advisor, Marek, approached her with a cautious smile. You've done well today, Arya. Better than well, actually. You've started a conversation that might just save us all. Arya nodded, her eyes reflecting the resolve that had carried her this far. It's not over yet, Marek. Tomorrow, I'll need to be even sharper. This is only the beginning. That night, under the ghostly light of Xiphiron's moons, Arya reviewed her notes and prepared for the final day of debates. Each word she chose, each argument she honed, was a step closer to her goal. Tomorrow, she would need all her diplomatic skill and human resolve to turn the tide fully in favor of peace and autonomy. As she finally set aside her work, looking out at the serene night sky, Arya allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The weight of her responsibility was immense, but so too was her belief in the principles she defended, that even in a galaxy brimming with conflict, there could be a place for peace, a role for every world, chosen freely and respected universally. The final day of the Galactic Assembly arrived with the suns of Zephyron casting an intense glow that seemed to mirror the heightened stakes inside the hall. General Arya Torin walked in, her demeanor calm yet resolute, prepared for what could be the most crucial day of her diplomatic career. As the delegates settled, the atmosphere was palpable with anticipation and the remnants of yesterday's debates that had ended in a cacophony of opinions. Arya had one last chance to sway the assembly, and as she took her place, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. The session began with Supreme Commander Vrax, who wasted no time in addressing the assembly. "Esteemed members, we stand at a crossroads," he declared, his voice echoing powerfully around the chamber. "We face a threat that seeks not just to defeat us but to obliterate our very way of life. I ask you, can we afford the luxury of neutrality when our existence hangs in the balance?" His words struck a chord, and murmurs of agreement rippled through the delegates. Arya listened, her expression unreadable, knowing the moment to counter would soon arrive. When it was her turn to speak, Arya rose with a quiet confidence. "There is no luxury in neutrality," she began, her voice steady and compelling. "It is a choice, one that should be made freely, not imposed. We are not asking to stand apart from this conflict because we fear sacrifice. We ask to serve in a manner that aligns with our principles and capabilities." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Yesterday, we heard voices from across the galaxy, voices that spoke not just of battle but of healing, innovation, and diplomacy. Is the strength of this great assembly found only in its fleets and soldiers? Or is it also in the diversity of our contributions, the breadth of our unity?" Arya's question lingered in the air, challenging and profound. Before anyone could respond, she continued, "Today, I bring before you a proposal, a treaty of neutrality for those who choose it, with strict terms of non-aggression and active humanitarian aid." A hologram materialized beside her, detailing the treaty's clauses, emphasizing the active roles that neutral planets could play, from medics to mediators. The room watched, intrigued by the tangible form her words had taken. As she concluded, Vrax stood, his demeanor less confrontational than before, perhaps recognizing the shift in the room's energy. "General Torin proposes a middle path," he acknowledged grudgingly. "But consider this, should the rebels breach our defenses, the neutrality she cherishes will be the first casualty." Arya met his challenge with a nod. "A valid concern, Supreme Commander, and one that this treaty addresses with commitments to collective defense mechanisms, intelligence sharing, and non-combat support. Neutrality does not mean isolation, it means participating in a way that prevents war from becoming the only language we speak." The debate that followed was intense, with representatives taking turns to voice their support or concerns. The delegate from Nova spoke passionately about the need for diverse strategies in war, not just frontline battles. The representative from Signet highlighted how their advanced technologies could better serve through strategic defenses rather than direct combat. As the hours passed, the tide seemed to turn, with more delegates nodding in agreement than shaking their heads in dissent. When it came time to vote, the tension was almost tangible. Arya watched, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as one by one, the representatives cast their votes. Finally, the president of the assembly stood, the final votes tallied. "With a majority in favor, the Treaty of Neutrality and active contribution is hereby passed." A collective breath seemed to be released throughout the hall. Vrax, though clearly not fully satisfied, nodded in reluctant acceptance. The decision was not the clear-cut victory he had hoped for, but it was a resolution that maintained the assembly's unity. As the assembly disbanded, delegates approached Arya, congratulating her on her diplomacy. Even some who had been skeptical were now acknowledging the value in her approach. You have forged a new path for us, General Torin, the delegate from Verdant said, his voice filled with respect. One that might just lead to peace. Arya smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. Thank you. It's a path we walk together, she replied, her eyes reflecting the determination that had carried her through. As she left the hall, Arya felt a mix of relief and resolve. The treaty was a beginning, not an end. It was a commitment to try and resolve conflicts with words and aid rather than weapons and war. She knew challenges lay ahead, but for now, Earth and other like-minded worlds had a role they had chosen freely, an active, peaceful contribution to a galaxy in turmoil. The sons of Zyphron said as Arya walked back to her quarters, casting long shadows on the ground. The day had been long and fraught with challenges, but as she looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle in the evening sky, she felt a hopeful peace. For her, and for the galaxy, a new chapter was just beginning.